On tonight's episode of the Hammerheads Show, will Trey Lance be the 49ers starting quarterback week one? Stay tuned as we discuss that. Hello, everybody. This is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and I have, as with always on Monday night for the Hammerhead Show, my partner Rob Shue. How you doing tonight,
Hello,
Rob?
Jack.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going very well. I am just back in town from LA. Had a nice sunny weekend. Seemed to have brought the rain with me. Had a little rain in LA today, but now I am back in Portland.
There you go. And just in time for a lot of 49ers topics to be coming up.
Yes, sir.
NFL Annual Meeting taking place out in Florida, and both John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan will be meeting with the local media who are out there. Today was John Lynch's turn. Tomorrow it'll be Kyle Shanahan. So let's just go ahead and dig into some of the topics. Obviously, everybody wants to talk about Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
And so what was said about Jimmy Garoppolo today? I think the first thing that most folks want to hear is or don't want to hear really, is that Jimmy Garoppolo is here for a while. It doesn't sound like the 49ers are in any hurry to move forward. That the shoulder injury caused some problems with them in terms of being able to make a trade. And basically, they're willing to hold on to him until they can either get a deal for him or they start to compete in training camp. What are your thoughts on that piece of what John Lynch said today?
I mean, I have to, on a very core fundamental level, I have to agree with John Lynch. I personally believe that there is significant value to Jimmy Garoppolo as an asset for a football team. So from a business standpoint, I truly understand the idea that you can't just let go of an asset. You have to attempt to get the commiserate value for that asset. And I thought John sort of walked through the idea that, yes, things played out in a way that was unexpected. They had made some contingency plans along the way. This was not plan A to still have Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster. And I thought that was courageous of him to acknowledge that. And I completely agree that Jimmy is an asset, and you have to attempt to get some value back in return for that asset, because otherwise you're being foolish in business, and you can't afford to do that. You have a limited number of assets. You got to try and get the return on that.
Exactly. And it sounded to me as we're hearing him talk, it seemed like they do have an idea of what direction they're going to take. And he was pretty forthright with the feeling that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be playing in 2022. And he made the comment that it's either going to be with us or another team. What were your thoughts on that? Because I have some specific thoughts, but I want to get yours first.
Yeah, on Jimmy playing for the Niners or for another team. I mean, I still do believe that's a bluff. I do not think that the San Francisco 49ers really want to roll with 3 quarterbacks on their roster, paying $2 million guaranteed to Nate Sudfeld. You have the rookie contract for Trey Lance, who I would assume the 49ers still do want to be their starter, and we can touch on that a little bit later with some of the comments as well. But Jimmy Garoppolo just crowds the scenario, and to me, it does it unnecessarily. So he is still an asset right now, but I do think that at some point he becomes a liability. So I don't necessarily buy what John is selling there about Jimmy playing for the 49ers. I believe they'll hold on to him until they're able to get that asset in return. But I just can't imagine a situation where it truly is a quarterback competition. So I think John's right. I just think he's right that he's going to be playing for another team.
Yeah, and he did mention that there had been some preliminary discussions with teams. The one thing that he mentioned is it did sound like he mentioned at one point that they still believe that they're going to hold true to what they value him at, which is we don't know exactly what it is, a 2, a 3, what have you. And the other piece that I'm hearing from him is that it sounds like there's been, to me, I'm reading into things a little bit here, obviously, kind of just reading between the lines and kind of maybe leading a little bit with the direction that he's taking. And it really seems like they feel pretty confident that they're going to be able to move him before training camp. That's the way that I took it, because it sounded to me like like he said at one point, they still feel like there's some interest in Jimmy Garoppolo out there. And so I think that they have a pretty good idea of where what's available, and that it's just a matter of Jimmy Garoppolo's shoulder healing up and him being able to throw the ball before a team's ready to pull the trigger on making that move.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting quote where he talked about things feeling like they were good going into the combine. And that was the sense that I got as well. He did dance around whether the shoulder surgery was a surprise to the San Francisco 49ers or not. I thought that in some ways he seemed very truthful about that, in indicating that, well, Jimmy did the rehabilitation, then went back into the doctor, and that's when the decision was made about the surgery. Then he goes on to say, and he says it multiple times, around the team blessing it. And I don't know that I necessarily buy that Jimmy Garoppolo and his camp were waiting on any sort of a blessing from the San Francisco 49ers to do what was right for Jimmy Garoppolo and his long-term health. I thought that was more what Joe Staley was referencing when he was talking about Jimmy making a business decision, right? At some point, Jimmy Garoppolo needed to look out for Jimmy Garoppolo. And if your doctor is telling you, hey, it's time to get this surgery in order for you to be right long-term, I doubt he checked in with the Niners on that one. And I got a true sense from Lynch at the combine that he looked fairly surprised by that news. So that one, I thought he was dancing around a little bit, but he certainly was honest about, hey, we had some energy. We had some momentum going with trades. No, nothing was confirmed. Nothing was an actual offer on the table that we could have accepted at any point, but there was interest. And then the shoulder surgery happened, and that cooled a lot of teams. They wanted to do due diligence, and then chairs started moving in the musical chairs came, and all of a sudden things went pretty quick.
Yeah, and things got away from them. And I do agree with you on the fact that I do not believe that they knew that this was going to be happening with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think they knew that the surgery was happening. You just have, if you listen to what he said at the combine, he basically told everybody that he knew nothing more than what the reporters had what they just heard that day.
Right. And that does not indicate, oh, I had an in-depth conversation with Jimmy's agent just a moment ago, but I only know what you know. No, that means like, yeah, you're hearing about it right now and you're caught a little bit off guard. And that's unfortunate. But again, I do think that you have to acknowledge the human element of this, and whether they want to publicly acknowledge it or not. And I get that they do not want to publicly acknowledge it. It's awkward, right? This is a breakup phase of a relationship where one party has already said their farewells and it totally intends on being out of the door. And yet you kind of have to stay under the same roof for financial reasons, right? But it is awkward. It's an awkward situation.
That's a good way of putting it. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but I think you're right. The deal here is Garoppolo's going to be moved. If you're asking me, I feel like Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be on another team this year. I do not see him coming in. Let me just back that up just a little bit. Well, I would be fine with seeing Jimmy Garoppolo show up to training camp to compete with Trey Lance for the starting quarterback job of the 49ers. And I think that they'd be okay going through that, even with all of the, as you said, the awkwardness that kind of comes with it. I don't foresee him being in training camp with the 49ers. If the only way that I see Jimmy Garoppolo throwing another pass in Santa Clara at the 49ers training facility is if Trey Lance completely bombs during OTAs and minicamp. Otherwise, I think he will be moved before he gets there in end of July, beginning of August, whenever camp starts.
I tend to agree, because you've got a scenario where there aren't very many hard deadlines coming up that will force any of these suitors or potential trade partners that exist to really pull the trigger early on. So I do think that Jimmy lingers on the roster, and that does give Trey Lance the opportunity to take all of, or at least the vast majority of the snaps in OTAs. And maybe that is an added benefit for the 49ers to get some confirmation of the progress that has been made by their young star quarterback in the offseason. That's a bit of a positive. It's offset by the negative of Jimmy's value. I think you have to acknowledge that regardless of wherever it started, it's less now than where it was, because it was a simple supply and demand issue. And unless some factors change, the demand is significantly decreased. And Jimmy Garoppolo may be one of the only options still remaining out there, but there's only a handful of teams, and none of them have a extreme need for a quarterback. So it does present an interesting conundrum of when do the 49ers lower that value they placed on Jimmy? Because John mentioned that a couple of times of, hey, like, we weren't moving off of the value we placed on Jimmy because he has value to us. We view him as an asset that's at a certain level. And so that was our asking price, and we stayed with that.
Yeah. So let's go through this just for giggles. You know, I've said that I feel like he's not going to be a 49er, and you agree. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw out where I think he's going to go.
Okay.
I think he's going to end up in Carolina. I think he's going to be a Panther. And I think what's going to happen is this is a deal that's going to get done after the draft.
Okay.
He's going to be, it's because right now, if you know, the Panthers have pick number 6 in the draft, and they don't pick again until like 130 something or 140 something. So they're picking early in the draft. And they don't have another pick for a long time. So what I think is going to happen here is if Garoppolo is healthy in July, a trade is going to be consummated. It might even be one that sends Garoppolo and a 3rd round pick coming back in exchange for Sam Darnold, because I don't think the 49ers want to go into this season with only 2 quarterbacks on the roster. You know, so in doing the Darnold trade, the 49ers still save about $9 million in cap space, which they can then be turned into signing your draft picks if they haven't already signed by that point. Usually they're not signed until right before camp, most of the draft picks. So if you do that trade in early July, it works out that way. Or you just say, no, Sam Darnold isn't even a part of it. And the 49ers, Carolina decides to roll with Garoppolo, extend him for a year, because they have the cap space right now to absorb his number.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
They're at 29, almost 30 million against the cap.
I agree that Carolina strikes me as the most logical landing spot. I see Sam Darnold as the biggest obstacle to that trade, because of the idea that when I follow the money, I do struggle to believe that the 49ers in an ideal situation would really want to carry the 3 quarterbacks. It seems to me, when you follow the money, that, by setting up Nate Sudfeld with that guarantee, it seemed they were going cheap at the backup quarterback position. It would feel out of character if they then had a very well compensated backup and kept Nate Sudfeld. That would have felt like a more natural transition if they had paid Nate the commiserate money to put him down on the practice squad. But I could see the 49ers carrying 3 quarterbacks. I mean, it may not have been, again, plan A, but they may have pivoted to that. They have done it in the past. It's just hard to buy. I guess it was hard to buy at those times that, Nick Mullins and CJ Beathard were such hot commodities that they needed to keep all 3 on the roster. But again, with this threesome, if you're talking about Sam Darnold as the backup, again, to me, the question becomes what is the real value that you're getting out of Nate Sudfeld at that point? But the response to that can simply be that, hey, that wasn't plan A. The plan A was for Nate Sudfeld to be the backup. And now the set of circumstances have unfolded such that it is better for them to take on that deal with Sam Darnold, as you suggest as a hypothetical, than to go another route where they're stuck with Jimmy or have to release him. I'd prefer a deal that doesn't involve Darnold, but I'm honest about the fact that the Niners need to get creative at this point. They've got to find a deal that works for multiple teams, and that may mean that it's less ideal for the Niners themselves.
And that's part of, and maybe, that's me just kind of thinking through things and thinking that might be an option. I could see a deal where Sudfeld isn't, or not Sudfeld, but Darnold isn't included. And like I said, they bring in Garoppolo, they give him an extension on his contract for a year or 2, whatever it is, to reduce his cap hit. And, maybe they're paying him $10 million this year and he has a $25 million the year after or whatever.
Right.
Some number that makes it so they're not paying $45 million to 2 middle of the road quarterbacks, right?
Yes.
Out in Carolina. So we're both of the same mind that he will not be here.
Yeah. And I think you have to acknowledge that when I say, oh, well, it wouldn't be ideal for the San Francisco 49ers, you flip the script on that. It takes two to tango. If you're the Carolina Panthers, you want Sam Darnold the hell out of there, right? So it's not ideal for them to keep him. So in this situation, you've passed the ideal phase where you could have found a trade partner where it would have benefited both sides. I think as soon as Matt Ryan went to Indy, that felt like that went out the door, where Jimmy could walk in, really benefit the team that he went to, win with the team that he went to, and we could get fair compensation. That didn't work out. Now I think it is messy. So we may have to take Darnold. The Panthers may have to have two overpriced, not quite starter quarterbacks. It's not an ideal scenario anymore.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then there's in the super chat real quick, Chris, thank you for the donation. He says, Chris Royal, he says, if Jimmy goes to training camp to compete, I fail to see it being much of a fair competition. He has too many supporters on the roster. And on this one, I understand where you're coming from, Chris. I disagree in that I think if Trey Lance performs at the level they expect him to, that the rest of the roster will fall in line if he's the better guy that gives him the best chance to win.
Yeah, I would say I fear that what Chris is talking about would happen, but I hope the reality, there you are on that side, is what you're describing there. That as soon as it becomes clear that Trey Lance is performing at a certain level and that Trey Lance's level of competition provides the 49ers with a chance for success in season, these are professionals that want to win. I think they will make the transition. This is not their first rodeo. They have seen business decisions getting made. However, if it's one of those things where Trey, has a slow start, it does get awkward. I know John Lynch is trying to say it won't, but I think it does.
Yeah, and I also just I know I've heard some different things around the support that he has. I understand that, and people reaching out to talk about how good Garoppolo is, but I just feel like if they're put in that situation, that it's gonna be Lance, and that they'll be able to work it out. And the guy that is the best guy is going to play. And to be honest, I don't think we're even going to see him out there. I don't think it's going to get to that.
I hope not.
I hope not either. Well, actually, I kind of do, because it'll be fun to cover.
It really would. Like, I say that because I'm tired of talking about it at the moment, because it has been something I expected to be over by this point. So I sort of emotionally prepared myself for that. But let's be honest. I mean, competition is fun to cover, right? These are two talented quarterbacks. Both should be starters in the NFL this season. And if they're both on the same roster, it'll be entertaining to watch and talk about. That's for sure.
Yeah. And Tony says, I 100% disagree. It won't be a fair competition because Trey will have had all the offseason snaps. Well, correct. And then real quick, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, well, I love the one. No, you got to, this one's too good. I can't pause on this one.
No, I like what Stud said here. He said, Will Smith that like button, and please go ahead and Will Smith that like button, but don't walk off the stage. Stay here with us, please.
Just open hand it one time, but you got to stick around afterwards, like he did to take the award later on, right? That's exactly the way I wish that works. Man, that was a wild event. I saw that last night. Crazy. I lost my train of thought on where I was going because I'm too excited about the Will Smith comment. But I do think that, the competition would be great. But again, I would rather it just be clear cut, have Jimmy off of the roster and just have a more straightforward, because it came back to me what I was going to say. Not only is Trey going to have all the offseason snaps, but what Kyle Shanahan said to us in as much last season was, what I realize is the offense needs to look a little bit different for Trey. And in going back and forth, I didn't find that was fair to, some of the players and to myself as well, in getting into a rhythm. So if he gets into that rhythm in giving Trey all the snaps, it is then a reversal to go back to Jimmy by Kyle's own description of how he prefers to call plays and operate the offense, having two distinctly different stylistically quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, I think this team needs to take a step forward. They need to. We know that Jimmy Garoppolo can win under certain conditions and get to a certain level. I would like to see the team take a step forward. And like Josh Mangold says here, Lance is going to win this one, fellas. And that takes us to our next topic, which is John Lynch on Trey Lance. Lynch was asked a couple of different things, regarding Lance, and he was non-committal to Lance being the starting quarterback in 2022 with some of the different comments he had today. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are I still believe that to some extent, the 49ers are being prudent here. I understand that this is a major transition from a team that has been winning, especially last year and getting to the NFC Championship game, to an unproven commodity. And so to me, I have been talking about what this offseason and the moves that the Niners have made to this point signifies to me. And it is my interpretation of the strategy that the San Francisco 49ers have put out there. But I have described it as mildly conservative, as prudent. And I say that because to me, yes, I was completely wowed by the transition I saw, the transformation almost from week 5 to week 17 in the way that Lance progressed from that game plan against Arizona to what he was able to put up against Houston. So that left me very optimistic. And I'm a reasonable person. I like to see a preponderance of the evidence, not just a small sample size. And I think that, in order to get that, you've got to see just a little bit more. So I get this idea that it's like, we just want to confirm what we have right now. And yes, it's not ideal. Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be on the roster, but you know what? It gives us a little bit of a security blanket that we otherwise wouldn't have. Because if things went badly after the Jimmy trade, I don't think the Nate Sudfeld era is going to be the one that all 49er fans want to see happen. So I guess I see it as a bit of prudence on their part. And then the last piece is he just can't come out and say that, right? He just cannot dismiss Jimmy and anoint Trey because that ruins Jimmy's trade value.
Right. And that's the question that I would ask anybody, the people that are getting frustrated with the fact that they have not just come out and John Lynch did not come out today and say, Trey is our starting quarterback. We are going with Trey. The question to ask yourself is, what do the 49ers gain from doing that other than not having people argue about it on Twitter?
Yeah, really. Maybe Trey Lance feels a little more secure, but if they're talking with him behind the scenes anyway, then he knows that, right?
Right. Now take yourself back to the end of the season and the last presser that he had after the season's over with, and he pretty much he had to stop himself from saying that he was told to be that he was going to be the starting.
Corrected himself. It's like, no, I heard you, Trey. I heard that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So there's really nothing to be gained by them coming out and just saying Trey's the guy. We're riding Trey no matter what. There's nothing, especially at this point when Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the roster. Those conversations I would expect to have been had internally, but we're not going to hear that, and I'm okay with it, even though I'll ask the question when the time comes. You had mentioned some of wanting to see a little bit more of Trey Lance before you kind of anoint him as well. That was the other thing that you had said, and that's what John Lynch said as well today, and that's partly why I feel like we're going to see a move off of Jimmy Garoppolo. Right now they're holding on. Right now we're holding on to him. But actually, that's the wrong one. He says there's a lot of questions of what all of this means for Trey, meaning Jimmy Garoppolo and the situation where he is. The great news is that we're extremely positive, as I have said, and Kyle said, on Trey's progress. This offseason, he'll have an ample opportunity, as will Nate Sudfeld, to get plenty of reps, and we're looking forward to that progress and that process. And that's the same thing. He said that he kind of said that again at another point in his whole thing. It's that, with Trey Lance, the quarterback is such an important spot on the team. We're thrilled with what he's shown already and where he's going to grow, an opportunity for growth through an offseason program. And it's vital. It's that old saying, 10,000 reps, and he needs them. He'll have an opportunity this offseason, as we will as a team. So he's not committing to Trey Lance, but he's committing to Trey Lance.
But I see that as like a mixture of truth and posturing. That's the interesting part of it is you can dissect it and you can get into it and say, I think he's being very genuine when he talks about the 10,000 reps. You're talking about an old school football guy who understands what it takes to truly hone in on your craft, right? The practice, the repetition, getting out there and doing it consistently. I think that is true. At the same time, to your point about Jimmy Garoppolo, he cannot anoint Trey Lance because that devalues Jimmy Garoppolo. And at this point, the 49ers are absolutely still attempting to trade him in a weak market. So they can't hamstring themselves any further by saying, well, we everybody knows that we're not going to start Jimmy. We're just holding on to him until somebody gives us some offer that we're willing to take. You can't admit that, right? That may be the truth. That may be what John wants to say, but you cannot publicly admit that, because then your bargaining position goes from weak to non-existent. At least right now, it's there on some level, because they're saying, well, we've budgeted for this. There's a chance that Jimmy's on the roster, right? He's teasing that idea that, is it an ideal option that we keep Jimmy? No, we'd rather trade him to you. We're having some ongoing conversations. Let's get this trade done. But if we don't get this trade done, and that hypothetical maybe is Carolina, what John Lynch has now said is there's an alternate plan, a plan we can live with. It may not be the ideal plan for the 49ers. It may not be the ideal plan for the locker room. It may not be the ideal plan for Trey Lance, but it's a plan that we can operate, and it means that we don't give away this asset for free. You're muted, Jack.
Thank you. You're right. He is an asset, and that's part of the whole reason why he hasn't. That's the other reason why he hasn't been moved, right? Or why they're not just releasing him. They're not just going to cut him. They want to get something for him, whether you feel that a third round or second round draft pick or whatever they're going to get for him in the future is worth it. I think that's the direction they're going, and I can understand. I understand their process. Don't totally agree with everything that they're doing along with it, but again, I wouldn't be bad. I would not be angry if you had Garoppolo there, given their issues that they've had at quarterback when they've had injuries.
Yeah.
When you turn the clock back and you look at the last 5 years of the 49ers, we're looking at this, and we're going to get into some other topics here in a minute as far as non-quarterback things. But and offensive line is the one that I keep hearing about a lot, because that seems to be the one area that the 49ers haven't made. They lost Lincoln Thompson, so everybody feels that this offensive line is falling apart. The 49ers have done a very good job of winning under Kyle Shanahan when they've had the quarterback position right. It doesn't matter if Joe Staley was at left tackle or Justin School. They won plenty of games. They won plenty of games this last season with Tom Compton, who was the laughingstock of the 49ers training camp in 2020. Playing right tackle, and then Colton McKivitz at left tackle in week 18. So the quarterback position is what's going to determine where this team goes. And John Lynch, and I think it's going to be Trey Lance. Everything that I heard today led me to believe, just kind of reading between the lines, as far as Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play somewhere next year, here or somewhere else, and I don't see that being the 49ers. I just really don't.
No, nor do I. I think we are in alignment on that. They cannot say as much. I did not expect them to say as much. You expected them to dance around the questions just as they did today. I did think that some pieces of truth came out. I didn't find this to be a completely useless exercise in asking John Lynch some questions. I did think there was some honesty in those answers. I appreciated the way in which he talked about the quarterback carousel. I think describing it in a way that it may have moved a little faster than John Lynch and the 49ers anticipated, because there were some unknown commodities that thrust themselves into the mix out of nowhere. And so I think it's still fair to criticize the front office. You have to wait until this thing is fully resolved before you can give a complete breakdown of it. But I do think that it's fair to say at this point that regardless of how it plays out, the 49ers may have failed to pivot when things began to speed up, when the carousel began its movement and pieces began to fall into place. Now, you could say that it was too late at that point, and unless we have the behind-the-scenes information, we'll never truly know that. But given what John said today about not lowering the asking price because they have a certain value that they attach to Jimmy Garoppolo, while I don't think you can make concrete assertions about that, I do think a basis of criticism could be, hey, you probably should have pivoted at that point. You should have seen the speed of things ramping up and lowered that asking price if you truly wanted to move him. Because at this point, I have to imagine that his value is currently at its lowest.
I agree. I think it is as well, because of the injury and
what
have you.
And not much demand.
Yeah, and who knows what it would have been. Right now, you've only got one team that's kind of left out in that whole dance floor.
Right. Not
Uh,
much bidding going on.
yeah, and then Aaron from 49ers First Takes, thank you for the donation. Let's get into this one a little bit. He says, "Hello, brothers of the tube of you. Is it me, or does John Lynch talk out of both sides of his face? Or does he think nobody notices? And how come local media never calls him out?" Did you want to take this one first?
I will jump in on that. So I think yes, he does talk a little bit out of both sides of his face. I think he has to. I think that is the role. Unfortunately, I don't think that part of the role suits John Lynch very well. And I'll jump right to the end of the question because I think they are connected in that way. John Lynch is a guy's guy. Like, he's a likable dude. He's a very friendly individual. I think in most circumstances, when you know that he's saying these things because he has to say them, and you know that digging further is just going to cause John Lynch to do a two-step a little bit faster around the question that you're asking him, right? Because he's got to dance around it. I don't actually fault the questions there. I think that they're reasonably fair. I get that it's much more West Coast, like people are pretty polite. It's not hard driving questions, but my interpretation of those hard driving questions, they rarely get legitimate answers from it either. I get the frustration of not hearing the questions being asked, but to me, this is sort of what I expected to come out of this owners meeting. A little bit of information, but primarily a big nothing burger, because that's just what you have to do while you're in the middle of negotiations. I will look for more concrete answers when this is all done, because I do want answers on this. I want to know why we devalued an asset that I felt we could have gotten more for, why we didn't act more prudently, quicker, and get that asset off of the books. But at this point in time, I'm not expecting those answers.
Yeah, and from what I heard from John Lynch today, isn't any different than I think we would have heard from any of the other 31 general managers in their press uh, responsibilities. He's not going to come out and give you straight answers. These guys don't do that. That's why when they have their pre-draft, press conference, do you expect them to come out and tell you who the first round draft pick is going to be? You don't. You don't expect him to really say a whole bunch of anything, and that's really, when you go back through what John Lynch said today, there was very little that he said during the time that he spoke, with everything that I read, that is different than what he said a month ago, the last time he spoke. When he was out in Carolina, in Indianapolis for the combine, it was almost all exactly the same talking points, stated the same way. The only difference was that today he was a little bit more clear about the situation with Jimmy Garoppolo, because it didn't just break that morning before he went live. Right when he was out there, it literally hit Twitter right around the same time as he was going live on NFL Network. So
yeah,
it sure seemed to me, by everything I heard when he was out in Indianapolis, that it hit him from the sideways. They weren't ready for that. And so in terms of taking him to task, I mean, you can, and I think that more than anything, it needs to be a little bit more. Some of these questions need to be a little more direct. I was sharing some of those with Rob before the show. Some of the questions that I would have asked, it's one of the it's just Bay Area media. I have some I have some ideas as to why people feel the way that they feel about the Bay Area media, outside of just the questions that are asked. These guys, I'm going to say this real quick. Everybody that's in that media room does their job in a professional manner, whether you agree with them or not.
Yes. That's a fact.
And I saw a tweet yesterday afternoon that basically said that it was going to be one news outlet out there, and watch, they're going to get the scoop. And my response back to that was that this is 100% incorrect, because it was. The thought around the 49ers is that everything goes through one group. Obviously, Matt Mayoko and Jennifer Lee Chan are going to get most of the coverage. They work for one of the bigger news outlets, and they have a commitment with the 49ers through their television rights.
Right. And Matt Mayoko is one of the longest tenured beat reporters for the 49ers.
Correct. But the press today was, if you wanted to be there and you were a member of the 49ers beat and you wanted to be there and you had the money to get there, you could have been there. So if you didn't hear what you wanted to hear, some of us don't have the money to get out there. Let's just put it that way. Because there was, I understand the questions I think that people wanted to hear. I know the question that I wanted to ask, and that'll be asked when I get a chance to sit in front of them during OTAs and minicamp for the first time.
Yeah. And I saw in the comments someone talking about that I'm drinking some good Kool-Aid at the moment, but I don't think I'm being team friendly or anything. I acknowledge that this situation is not how I would want it to be. I don't think it's how the 49ers want it to be. I think it worked out less than ideal that their compensation has dropped precipitously from what they could have gotten. My only point around, having some being okay with what John Lynch said is that I don't have an expectation that he's going to give me any more information than that. Until situations become in the past, I don't think they can provide the full details because it's an ongoing business and an ongoing business deal, right? If I'm attempting to acquire a company and someone comes in and asks me prudent questions about that deal, I'm going to dance around it. I'm not going to say a word because I'm still in those negotiations. Afterward, if we don't get a little more detail, if we don't get some answers for why the 49ers were unable to be a bit more successful in trading away an asset that they've repeatedly told us had significant value, I think at that point I'll be more disappointed. But right now I'm with Jack that I didn't really expect to get very many answers out of this session.
Yeah, right. Yep. And then real quick, Adrian asked the question. I hit the wrong one. Adrian asked the question. Yeah, Jack, why are you, Rob, or Grant not there to ask pertinent questions? The YouTube hits you guys would be astronomical. I'm not going to answer for either the other two. Rob can answer for himself. But I'm not there because I don't have the money to fly from California to Florida and put myself up in a hotel for a few days. So that's the reason why I'm out here. Plus, I'm working more than one job so that I can make ends meet at this point. I haven't grown my YouTube platform to the point in which I can do this full time and do all the travel and everything else that I want to do. So thank you, Adrian. That's the direction that we're taking this because I'm hoping that next year I can be there.
Yeah, absolutely. I contemplated going for the media credentials for that event, but honestly just had to weigh the cost of going from Portland. I mean, there is no longer frickin' flight than Portland to frickin' Florida, right? And you're getting on it with a bunch of people coming from Orlando. So going to or coming from Orlando, and that doesn't sound like a delightful 6-hour journey with all the screaming children headed towards or coming home from Disneyland. But it was a scheduling conflict. Hey, do I want to spend the money to go out to Florida and cover this event that will probably give a couple of sound bites, but quite honestly is not jam-packed full of things that a reporter can really access. So it was a choice between that or the draft. The draft seemed like a clear-cut winner. The combine and the draft took precedence.
Yeah, I think so. I think that those are going to be really good. I don't think he missed a whole lot today.
Nope.
I do understand what
we didn't get any answers there. Anyway. My question would have been ignored too.
I do get where you're coming though from, Adrian. That's definitely a goal in the future.
Yes.
Problem blessed. Thank you for the donation. He says trade Jimmy to Dancing with the Stars. Hey, we know that Jimmy can do a really good twirl. I mean, if nothing else, we know that he can do a pretty good spin.
Hey, as long as we get something in return, I'm all for it.
Well, maybe we get one of those disco balls or something like that. I don't know. David Wilson, thanks for the donation. He says, "Is it me or is 25 mil greater than any pick Jimmy can get us?" Okay. Here's the thing on that, and I know this is going to maybe get some people really riled up who were telling me last year that the 49ers should have gotten rid of Jimmy Garoppolo so that they could roll that cap money over for the following year, right? If the 49ers had just gotten rid of Jimmy Garoppolo last year, they could have rolled $25 million over last year, and they'd have that extra money on the cap right now. Well, if the 49ers trade Jimmy Garoppolo this year before the start of the regular season, you get $25 million rolled over plus a draft pick. So there's the reason why you don't do that.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, I do agree that the 25 million has value. I have seen some articles that attempt to talk about, well, potentially with the skyrocketing cap that the draft pick becomes more valuable than the money. I don't think so. I do think at some line, at some point in time, there is a line wherein the 49ers will not cross and that $25 million will have real value to them. But to Jack's point, if you can also add to that a draft pick of any level, regardless of whether it's 2022, 2023, and clear the 25, then business-wise, you've made the appropriate move. Even if in doing so, you put your fan base through a couple of months of unneeded stress, as a business, that's just the cost, right? Like, you got to get that asset.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Lost you for there for a second on my end, but it's okay. That's my own thing. Then we have Southside Tone. He says, thank you also for the donation. He says, I want to know the story behind the 49ers trading up 2-3 for Lance. Did Kyle really want him? I think he did. I think I don't. That's a good one. I like that one, Southside, because you can make an argument that John Lynch, if you just listen to the things they say, John Lynch has always been much higher on Trey Lance in his comments than Kyle Shanahan. But Kyle Shanahan seems to be that way with all of his quarterbacks.
Right.
So
he's hesitant to lump effusive praise on people. It's very rare for Kyle to do.
Right. And so I think that it's a situation where I feel like Kyle Shanahan might have liked one more than the other. At the end of the day, I think they both came to the conclusion that this was the guy that they wanted. I don't know if I buy their storyline is that it was Lance from day one, but this is who they have, and I have a hard time in this belief that Kyle Shanahan would have this quarterback who John Lynch drafted number one and spend all that for, and then sit on his hands and not do anything and want to try to make him be the quarterback. I think that's the direction that people are going with questions like this.
Yeah, I cannot imagine Kyle Shanahan, with the type of control he seems to exert on every situation he's involved in. I cannot imagine him going against his own gut, going against his own preference on a position as important as quarterback. I tend to believe that you only make that trade if you have a particular player in mind as your number one option. You have to have backup plans because you may assume what the teams in front of you are going to do, but unless you have the number one overall pick, you cannot guarantee that you get the person that you want. But my thought would be, it would be Lance. And the reason it's easier for me to believe that Kyle felt that way is I watched all the tape and I fell in love with Lance. So to me, if that's the player I wanted, if I saw the highlight reels and watched the tape on the candidates that seemed likely at that position, and I landed on Lance, to me, it's just as reasonable that Kyle Shanahan did as well.
Yeah, I think so. And then somebody pointed out down below that Lance, or not Lance, but Shanahan had actually sent tape to Lynch telling him that he couldn't sleep. He was all up night watching Trey. And that's when they started getting into the heavy discussions of making the trade for him. Aaron brings up again how Lynch in one interview said that having Jimmy on the roster would hamper free agency, then said it had no effect. That's what he said today. The first one was from the scouting combine. The other one was today. You know, you can't say that it didn't have any effect. It's interesting. It would be interesting to see what moves they would have made if they had $25 million to spend, or how much of that they would have spent. Right now, I would say of that 25, they probably would have spent about, maybe 15. Because they're going to be keeping some money. They have to keep some money for their draft class and during the season.
Yeah, it's tough to say that. I get what Aaron's saying there. I do think that is saying two things, that he is talking a little bit out of both sides of his mouth to the earlier comment from Aaron. But again, it falls into sort of what I would expect him to say. I think that it's fair to believe that the 49ers came in with a reasonably conservative approach to free agency, given the way in which they have approached it in the past. Like, I don't know that I expected them to take home run swings. The big question mark for me does become, would they have retained any of their own if they had freed up that money? And I don't think that we will ever know. There is truth to the idea that certainly having that money on the books complicated things for the 49ers. That, to me, you can't argue.
Yeah, I do think that it hampered them in a little ways. I don't think it dramatically. I don't think it kept them from bringing back the guys that they lost, and meaning especially Laken Tomlinson and DJ Jones. They weren't going to spend $13 million on a
No.
guard, and they weren't going to spend $10 million on a defensive tackle. That just wasn't going to happen. Those two
Right.
guys weren't going to come back they don't spend that kind of money at those positions. That's
No.
not the 49ers kind of have a price for each slot along the roster, and that's just not a number that they're going to go to at the interior of the offensive line or in the interior of the defensive line. That's partly why DeForest Buckner is a Colt and Eric Armstead's a 49er. The funny part about that, though, is Eric Armstead's actually a better defensive tackle than defense end, but that's a whole different conversation. And real quick, we have some other topics we're gonna get to, but this is fun because we got to hit on you guys real quick. Chris Royal, thanks for the donation again, says if the 2-2s offer was real, I'm thinking that was a loose offer from the offering team. They probably wanted to see how Russ and Aaron played out. More dominoes fell, and they retracted the offer. Yeah, I could see something like that being the case where there was discussions, about the player. They might have thrown out some numbers, but just because you threw out a number doesn't mean that it's an official offer. Like you say, hey, what would this, they could have said, hey, what if would 2-2s be enough to get you to move forward?
Right.
And then Lynch says, I think we could probably do that. And then they go back to the drawing board, and they don't actually come back and actually say, okay, well, we'll give you 2-2s. We want to do that deal. We'll give you 2 second-round picks for Jimmy Garoppolo. There's some nuance to that discussion in the negotiation process, I think.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's where my critique comes in is again, you can't know this. This is speculation. But if in those conversations, John Lynch saw the landscape of the quarterback scenario playing out and changing in real time and didn't alter the asking price for Jimmy Garoppolo, that to me, if that's how it played out, that to me would be the biggest misstep is not recalculating the value when things began to move, right? A fire sale was clearly happening. And at that point, you had to slash prices and get in the ring if you want to move that product.
Yeah, and I keep going back, and I have a feeling that this whole, whatever, maybe I'm a homer for the 49ers. I don't know what it is. But if I'm trading for a quarterback, I want to see the guy be able to throw the ball.
Yeah. Yep. That's fair. Especially if you're paying him $25 million.
Yeah, because I know exactly what you're saying, and it makes 100% sense, right? If when they saw everything moving, they should have been able to kind of just jump on something or take the offer that was on the table, if what have you. And I hear that, but I just don't think that there were teams that were actually making hard offers because of the fact that Garoppolo was hurt and he couldn't throw the ball, and it was going to be. And I understand how that a team can waive that, but I mean, we're not talking about Aaron Rodgers here. We're talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, a guy that you're expecting to come in, and you're going to be paying him pretty heavy price. I just don't see that happening.
I think that's fair. The shoulder surgery definitely seems to be the biggest wrench in this whole ordeal.
Yeah. So let's change pace a little bit, because I know that, the 49er fan base, they like talking about quarterbacks a little bit, but what they really like to talk about, Rob, is they like to talk about defensive ends who can't get on the field.
Yes.
and today we had a little, John Lynch did talk about some things other than Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. He also got into Dee Ford, and basically the information there that we heard is that the 49ers do not expect to see Dee Ford on the field this season. Any surprise to you there?
A little bit. I thought that it was going to be similar to last season. I thought we were going to see Dee Ford come out one last time. I was speaking to someone recently who had been following Dee Ford's Instagram, and he had indicated, it had been really quiet. And then all of a sudden he started posting on it again. And I thought, maybe he's starting to feel confident. Maybe that back is starting to heal up a little bit. I didn't anticipate we would get a full season out of Dee Ford. I figured it would be a similar situation. He'd come in, it would look like he was kind of healthy. He'd get some snaps, and then it would aggravate the back, and that would be it. I thought we were going to get one more crack at this thing, but I've got to say that there's a level of relief that I think will come with it. there's a part of me as a gearhead, you know, with all the references to Ford and the things you can say about a Ford being found on the road dead, driver returned on foot, right? Like I'm tempted to get into that. And I guess I just did. I couldn't help myself, Jack, but I don't mean it to disparage D Ford. I take injuries in the NFL very seriously. I hold no animosity toward him. I know for a fact he didn't choose to injure his back. Obviously, from the time he has spent rehabilitating that injury and attempting to come back to play, he very clearly has a passion for the game. And I'm sure it breaks his heart that he can't do what he wants to do. And I don't fault him for getting the money when he could get the money. And he did the Niners a couple of solids by renegotiating those contracts that, I mean, yeah, I'm sure it gave him some money in his pocket, but he didn't need to, right? He didn't have to come to the table and do that for the 49ers. He had guaranteed money that was coming his way, and he rearranged it such that it made it more convenient for San Francisco. So I'm sort of saddened by it. I would have liked one more comeback story, and there will be some relief when we do part ways.
Yeah, or you could just say fix or repair daily. That's the other one that you missed.
Yes, my favorite involves a curse word, so I won't throw it out there. But it ends in rebuilt Dodge, and so yes, it is. There's a lot of them out there. Ford, you know, they had some rough years when it came to reliability.
Yeah, and that's definitely been the case here with D. And it makes sense what the 49ers did from a salary cap perspective. They definitely get some. They get more cap relief by doing the restructuring that they did this year. They got some relief last year with a restructure for they've done it the last couple of years, and then he'll eventually be off the books here by 2024. It sounds like, because his dead cap all hits into next year. So D Ford not coming back with the 49ers. That was part number one, and the part number two that I found to be, it's not really a whole lot of new information, but I think fans should hopefully that this helps ease your worries just a little bit, that they do expect Alex Mack to return to the lineup this year. As Lynch said, he wasn't going to speak for Alex Mack, but from everything that he's seen and everything that he's heard, the expectation is that Alex Mack will be a 49er in 2022. Easy for me to say.
Most importantly, Jack, did you get your invitation to Alex Mack's wedding in Ireland? Because mine must have been lost in the mail.
No, I got it. I just, I told him that I'd pass this time because
is he?
I didn't want. Well, you don't want to steal the show, right? I mean, it's supposed to be about the bride and the groom, and then I show up and I start dancing, and the next thing you know, it's a whole Twitter thing, and so
it's hammer time at that point, baby.
It's probably better that I don't show up. So
yeah, that's very gracious of you, Jack. No, I mean, it looked like they were having a good time over there. This is a relief to me though, because this sets up like a perfect scenario. Invest in a young interior offensive lineman who can come in, hopefully compete at one of the guard spots, but train behind Alex Mack and get that imparted wisdom of a player who must be the center with the greatest amount of knowledge about Kyle Shanahan's offense, considering the number of stops that he has had along the way in playing with Kyle Shanahan. No better mentor for the next center. So to me, this sets up pretty well. He's coming back for one more year. You know, if he was considering retirement this year, you can kind of imagine he'll do it again next offseason. So address it now, get that interior offensive line, build up the guard positions, and have the depth for when Alex does decide to step away.
Yeah, I think if this holds true to form, I know that there's a portion of the fan base or folks that are going to say, well, they said the same thing about player X, Y, and Z. It's true. It's true.
It is true.
You never know. You never know until it happens. But if this does happen, it's the best case scenario for the 49ers with their offensive line. Alex Mack is getting up there in age, but he did play he improved his play as the season went on. He struggled a little bit at times early. Definitely there's some powerful guys that he struggled against, but I'd rather have him be back this year than juggling that position or trying to throw a rookie into that spot. So Alex Mack coming back is a good thing. I do feel like the 49ers are going to draft a center, and it's going to be somebody, I'm not sure which round, but there's a few of them out there. Alec Lidstrom is one of them. Jurgens from Nebraska is another, and then there's the kid from Kentucky as well, and his name is blanking on me at the moment. but that's another name there's a couple of look up Kentucky center and you'll know the name of who I'm talking about. But those are three. And the reason I bring up Kentucky and that center in particular, and Boston College is those are schools that run systems similar to what the 49ers do in the kind of a zone-based system, especially at uh, Kentucky, because the offensive coordinator from Kentucky last year is now with the Rams. So, in the 49ers, the reason that that Kentucky brought over the assistant offensive line coach from the 49ers and they brought over Rich Scangarello is because they are running the 49ers type of an outside zone with their offense. So kind of put two and two together, and that you can kind of watch the tape and see how he would fill in.
That'd be a nice transition.
Yes, it would. Yes, it would. Well, real quick, we've got Blind Tom. Thank you very much, Blind Tom 61, my guy. Thank you for the donation. That's right. He says, my two favorite Niner guys. Appreciate it. Tom's a great guy. Comes in and really appreciate his generosity as well. So I definitely, I'm looking forward to that return. And then next up is Deebo and Bosa. Didn't really hear anything new there other than Lynch stated that they've been in talks with the representatives of both of those players and that they expect them to be 49ers for a long, long time. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I haven't changed my opinion on that being the course of action for the San Francisco 49ers. There's been a lot of noise out there right now. When you look at what transpired in this offseason, I think it's fair that there has been some noise. When you watch a premier player like Devontae Adams get traded and you see some of the other things that have happened in this offseason, certainly the Tyreek Hill trade sent up a huge sort of smoke signal that nobody's untouchable. And that's fair. I do think John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have said as much in the past. I mean, Kyle Shanahan on multiple occasions has said, if John Lynch gets an offer for 3 first-round picks for me, he should probably take it. And so I think that there's a chance that something strange happens, but I see that as the outlier. I think the 49ers have intended to re-sign both of these players. Unfortunately, the deals that have been going out have made it that much more expensive to sign these players. But I would anticipate that Deebo Samuel gets a deal done. I would anticipate that Nick Bosa gets a deal done. They strike me as the last couple of pieces the Niners really want to lock down to get that core together. To me, Deebo is just such an emotional piece of this team. It would be a huge mistake not to get that deal done. And obviously his is the more pressing of the two.
Yeah, I think we're going to see. I don't know if we're going to see these get done this year or when they're going to get done. They're going to get done. I hear the talk about the Deebo Samuel trade. Could he be traded? Is there a player that's not tradable? No. Everybody on your roster could be traded at any point.
Yep.
Should the 49ers trade Deebo Samuel? No, because Deebo Samuel is the explosive element of their offense. He is the heart and soul of that offense. Really, he's kind of the engine that makes that run. And we'll see. I think at least for year one of Trey Lance, you need to have that guy, don't you? I mean,
right.
I've been hearing I've been hearing people talk for the last 2 weeks since free agency started, and the 49ers haven't been making moves about how they're screwing it up with Trey Lance because they're not putting the team around him. And then I'm hearing those same people say, should the 49ers trade Deebo Samuel? No.
Wait a minute.
Do you not see the disconnect between those two ideas? Is it a bad conversation to have? No, I understand what you're doing, but does it make any sense? Really? No, because the 49ers have the cap space. They work things around, and they take care of their own for the most part, unless it's a guy that's completely out of whack and within a salary structure. And the 49ers are not going to go into this season with Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings as I think their top two guys. I just wouldn't expect that to happen at all.
That would be sketchy. That would be really sketchy. That would not be setting up Trey Lance for success.
Right. And then also, I mean, like Ken says, Jed York kind of feels the same way because he retweeted Will Smith smacking Chris with the caption of whoever talking about trading Deebo. I mean, I put out the same joke, I think, before Jed did. I asked the question shortly after I saw what happened. I asked if Chris Rock had asked Will Smith if he should trade Deebo Samuel, and that's what I was wondering if that's why what prompted it before I found out the true reasoning of it. So no, it's could it happen? Yeah. Is it a smart move? No, I don't think so. So, well, I don't know. We'll see. And then I'm not sure what this one. Problem Bless says, thank you for the donation. He says, who's who? Rock, paper, scissors, equaling Rob, Hammer, and Cone.
I got to go. I'm giving you the Rock because I think you're solid, Jack. I think you're solid. I'm going to go with the paper for myself because I'm a lightweight. That's just where I'm going with that one. And scissors because Grant can cut to the point sometimes.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I was thinking that you were going to say that I'm the Rock and you're the paper because you're smacking me. And we all know that paper beats rock. But I like
in that case, yeah, I definitely would rather have a one-up over Grant. I'd like if that were the case, then I'd be the Rock. He could be the scissors. Just smash that up every now and then.
I like your first one. That was good though. I like it. I like it the other way around with you whacking me and then the Cone cutting it all up on the side. I like that. So there we go. And then the Bosa thing. You got Bosa come along and again, he's going to be around. There's nobody's talking about trading Nick Bosa. The 49ers. I think Nick Bosa, my comment earlier about the success of the 49ers when they have the quarterback position right, I think it's a little bit similar with the defense when it comes to Nick Bosa.
Yes, I agree. And to me, this is the interesting one of because Bosa does have an injury history, like typically you could say a player who felt airtight about their ability to continue to perform, who saw the trends, saw the upcoming increase in the salary cap, might want to bet on themselves and might want to hold out and say, no, I don't want to get a deal done right now. The longer I wait as Nick Bosa, the bigger my contract is going to be. If I can force the 49ers to extend me next offseason, it's just going to be that much bigger of a contract. But then you also have to look at the risk associated with it. So yes, he could take out a huge insurance policy on himself in case he were to get injured this year, but he could also have his agents negotiate a deal with considerable guaranteed money right now. And then it becomes a question of weighing the options. You have a bird in the hand versus two in the bush. And it just becomes a risk tolerance question. What is your risk tolerance? Do you want to bet on yourself and potentially get more money? Or do you want to take the money that is offered to you right now and lock in that guaranteed? I tend to think that Bosa will be a little more on that conservative side because we're talking about life-changing money. It's almost the kind of money that you want right now because you can start to invest it in property, in assets, and you can turn that type of wealth into generational wealth that feeds your family for several generations to come. So I would guess that they get it done sooner rather than later.
I agree. I think it's going to get done. Well, I think it's going to get done. I just don't know if I would say sooner rather than later. This one seems like one that's going to could come maybe during the season or early next year. That's the one that I do feel like is going to get pushed off. I think Deebo Samuel would get done. I think Bosa takes a little bit longer. I think the 49ers know that they're going to be paying big money for Bosa, so they may put that off. And you've got to realize that these guys all understand that the salary cap is going up. So it's not like they're getting over on the owners are getting over on them by getting the deal done today. They know that whatever they do is targeted towards big money in 2024,
right?
When that salary cap jumps. So they're not going to give the 49ers the benefit of the doubt and say, oh, you know what, we'll do it with you now because we like you.
Right.
And we'll take the money, even though we know that if we wait for a year, my client can get probably an extra $40 to $50 million. We'll do the deal with you because we like you guys. You're a nice guy, John Lynch.
Probably not. Not in those business negotiations.
No, that does not sound like a Bosa family negotiation, does it?
It does not. No, they seem to play hardball. They seem to want to get their bags.
Yeah. And then real quick, we're going to jump into our last topic. But before we do, Alan says, at Jack Hammer, smash that like button like Frank the Tank. Hit the hole on the way to the end zone. When I first read this, I got to admit, I thought you were talking about a different Frank the Tank, and I was going to say, we're going streaking through the quad. But I guess you're talking about Frank Gore. So
Hey, either one, both very quality characters.
There you go. There you go. And then last but not least, the Friars did make a move today with their roster, and the boss is back in town. If you're not sure who the boss is, we're talking about Ross Dwelley.
Ross
The
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 boss.
49ers made the move today to bring back their best tight end, with Ross Dwelley coming back to the fold for another year. Any thoughts? Any thoughts on that one, Rob?
It's interesting to me. I had since fallen in love with Jelani Woods out at the combine. I just, watching a 6'7", 260-pound man run a 4.640 after he had put up the most bench reps for a tight end. I was like, who is this guy? And he reminds me a little bit of Vernon Davis with less wheels. But then on some of the drills, I did get to watch him also remind me of Vernon Davis in some of his alligator arm catches as he tried to pin the ball to his chest on the deep passes. And then I learned later as I dug into my research that's his weak point is the drops. And so I still think that there's a chance the 49ers aren't done here. I mean, I'll wait to see the actual contract itself to see what type of guaranteed money is there. It didn't sound to me like Ross Dwelley was going to be back early in this offseason. So I wonder if this is more of it gives them flexibility. It allows them to still continue to address best player available within the draft. They have filled the hole that was there on the roster for the second tight end, but it doesn't mean that they can't upgrade it at some point, as long as they didn't hamstring themselves with the guaranteed money that they gave to Ross Dwelley. I would think that this is one of those contracts that wouldn't count against them if they decide to move on to another player during camp at some point.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm with you. This was a position, they right now it's like the quarterback room and the running back room, right? When you look at the running back room as it stands right now, it's the same exact group the 49ers had last year. When you look at the quarterback room, it's the same as it was last year. The tight end, it's all the same. Even the guys on the practice squad are still the same. In Matthews and the tight end that they picked up from off of the practice squad, I believe it was in Tampa Bay. So they have all these guys are coming back, and Josh Mangold earlier in the show, he had put this out, and I scrolled back up real quick to find it because it kind of falls in with what you're talking about. And that 49 of the 53 roster spots are set, not including Jimmy Garoppolo. And it's like you said, and this is what the 49ers do. This is the way that they do business in the offseason. They fill all the roster spots with guys that they feel can play, and then they get into the draft, and then that doesn't force them to say, oh my God, I have got to take this guy in the draft because we don't have anybody at that position. It's filled. And that's how most teams probably, we follow the 49ers closely. So that's why everything is so 49ers centric with my thinking. But I'm sure other teams around the league are doing this too, but it's a smart way of doing it. You fill your holes through free agency, even if it's the lower end free agents, and then you free yourself up in the draft to go best player available at that spot in the draft with your, and base that off of your needs.
It's such an intelligent way to approach it because the draft could go any which way, right? I mean, it is completely unpredictable. You believe you have your big board laid out in a logical manner. You believe that you have the appropriate grades on players of where they may get taken by other teams. You think that your scouting department has laid out what are team needs for everyone else. What are they going to be doing? But just like a fantasy football draft that I know our listeners have participated in, that thing can go sideways. And so this does insulate you from that. It allows you to remain flexible within the draft, to just pivot as needed, go with best player available. And I think there are still times where you lean toward one position group over another, in particular as a tiebreaker. I think the 49ers, in my estimation, will look to bring on, a speedy wide receiver, a safety at some point in the draft, an interior O lineman, probably some cornerback depth. I would expect a late round running back at some point. So I can kind of predict the position groups that they will go for, but having filled these other holes with at least suitable players. I mean, that these players have contributed for the 49ers in the past. It gives them that flexibility to pivot in the draft if they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it's going to work out for the 49ers on that one. That tight end was a spot that I didn't really look at. Never really looked and said the 49ers need to add a tight end in the draft. I can understand, like you're saying, because you're not the first person that I've seen today say I would have liked to have seen them go tight end in the draft. There was somebody else that hit me up as well that said they would have liked to have seen a tight end get taken in the draft. And who knows? Maybe they will. I mean, they surprised people last year taking 2 running backs. Maybe they'll take a tight end at some point in the draft. It doesn't. Again, all these signings that we're seeing right now, none of these are big name guys that are guaranteed roster spots. They're solid vets that can fill a role if necessary. But as you said, Josh, 49 of the 53 spots are set. I wouldn't say they're set in stone, though.
No, the key is follow the money. When you have big guaranteed money, those players are pretty much set in stone. But if you don't, if they're at the tail end of the contracts and that contract could become one of the lesser contracts that isn't one of the 51 most expensive contracts on the team, or there isn't the guaranteed money and they can move on, then that is just a body for that 90-man roster in camp.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Remember, until the team breaks camp and the final 53-man roster is set, it's only the top 51 that matters. Yep. And the 49ers are at a position right now where they've got it so that their top 51 and cutoff is over $1 million, which is over the minimum vet deal.
Yeah, and the vet minimum, right?
Yeah, so they can sign a bunch of guys for $1 million or less, a bunch of vets or younger guys, and not go over that top 51 threshold. Those numbers will change. And it'll go to all 53 later. Like I said, after the preseason's over with and the roster gets set and you move into the year. Again, that's why I would not expect to see Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster week 1 or even in training camp.
Nor I, sir. Nor I.
So there we go. Do you have any shows coming up, Rob, this week?
I definitely have a show tomorrow. I was debating doing a call-in show tonight, but I just got back from LA. Got to get settled. Got to do a little bit of laundry. Got to get ready for the week. So I don't think there'll be a show tonight. I'll be back on tomorrow with the mailbag. Look for the email, the tweet that goes out in the morning asking for the 49ers questions. And then the live mailbag happens on my channel tomorrow at 5 p.m.
There you go. So make sure you're getting over to Rob's channel tomorrow. Check that out because I'm sure that'll be fun to get all of his thoughts on your questions. It's funny because when I do those mailbags, all my questions are about like quarterbacks. It's just nothing but quarterbacks, and it makes it hard to do a mailbag when it's all about one position. It's like it's
challenging.
I
get sarcastic ones about the quarterback, and I love it. I mean, it gives because it's live. If I had to write the answer, it would be harder. But because I get to sort of, roll my eyes at various questions or play with it a little bit, I just try to have fun with the emotional damage that we're all going through at this point in time because of having that ginormous contract still on the roster.
There you go. And Adrian sends us off. He says, thanks for the show, guys. Good stuff as usual. Adrian, thank you. Really appreciate. I got to get rid of this. I appreciate everybody that took the time to join us tonight. Thank you for Rob for being the traveler that you are, being able to step up tonight, even with the crazy travel schedule that you had. I really appreciate you joining us.
Happy to, my friend.
I'm sure everybody in the comment section and watching this live enjoys your takes. I know I do. If you guys could just do me a big favor while you're here, go ahead and hit the like button. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit that little bell notification so you don't miss us going live. That'd be fantastic. Trying to grow this platform so that next year I can be out there for you guys and ask those tough questions that you're wanting out at that NFL owners meeting. So thanks a bunch, everybody. I will be back tomorrow night with Silvio Sunil for our 49ers throwback. Probably going to be talking more about what Kyle Shanahan has to say tomorrow, but keep it tuned here. We'll be back. Take care, everybody. Have a great Monday night.
Cheers.